Hi, I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
I'm the founder and CEO of Creative, and
I'm a brand strategist at Creative.
so this is Brand Therapy, where we talk about branding for success. Today we're going to be talking about
Brand strategy, the start of everything.
literally what we do.
Literally what we do.
So is the goal today to break down brand strategy, what it is, and how we do it?
Why it's important and how we actually go about it, what is kind of involved.
Yeah. So we do brand strategy for all industries, pretty much all sizes of business. And we have a certain methodology and process that we go through that is pretty consistent for every initiative we take on. So thought it might make sense to break that down, share it with you guys, and take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. I guess before we dive into, how we go about our strategic process, do you want to talk a little bit about what brand strategy actually is and why we go through this?
Yeah. So brand strategy is essentially the why, right? It's being it's using design thinking and essentially reverse engineering where you want to end up back to where you are, right? So how do you get to where you want to go without, and not necessarily just being tactical about everything with your brand and how you want to grow it, and not using personal preferences, but rather being strategic about who you're targeting, what value you offer them, and how you communicate and express that to them, right? You want to make sure your brand is able to come across in such a way that it appeals to those that you want to serve. A lot of times we work with clients who either have evolved away from appealing to their ideal target markets, or maybe startups that want to know, who should I target, who should I go after, how do I approach them, how do I come across? And so brand strategy will help kind of dictate all of those strategies and tactics that you'll need to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, for sure. The word I always use is the foundation. It's really, your brand strategy is the foundation of your brand. It's the foundation of, all the decisions you make, why you make those decisions. And like Rick said, it always goes back to some of those core elements, like core values, target markets, things like that.
Yeah. Just to interject real quick, so the why is very, very important. So it's been trendy for a little while to know your why in business, but beyond that, folks will come to us and they'll say, I need a website. Our question that we always ask is, why? Right? And usually what we come down to is that there's some sort of business problem that is really on the strategy level that they aren't able to articulate because maybe they can't see it, or they just don't have that experience to know what the issue really is from a strategy level. And it's our job to help them figure out what is that big picture that they're trying to really look at and assess, so they can decide where they are and where they want to go and the strategy to get there.
Exactly, and that perfectly segues?
Yeah, good enough.
Sure. Us into the first step or first phase of our strategic process, how we go about actually building a brand strategy, and that is what we call brand discovery. And so, asking those questions is a really big part of that phase. That's pretty much the first step. We sit down with a client, we ask them, all the questions. It's quite a deep interrogation.
Oh, yeah.
Really trying to hone in on why they exist, what their purpose is, so we can define those core values, those driving philosophies, better understand their target markets, what value they're providing to their target markets. So we go through, this extensive discovery phase. So, we get on the same page as our clients, so we, understand them and even help them understand themselves a little bit better to an extent.
Yeah.
So we can really, get at the core of who they are, and from there, that really, lays the foundation for every step we take after that.
Yeah, and there's a reason we call this brand therapy. It started as a joke, but it's pretty much legitimately therapy for your brand, making sure that business's brand is able to kind of know where it's going, who it is, what its goals are. We help them dissect all of that during this discovery process, asking all the why questions.
Exactly.
Which usually segues pretty smoothly into how do you position in the market space, because we can ask them, why do you do this, or why do your customers love you if they're already in business. But it's not just why do you do this and why do your customers love you, but it's also compared to others, right? Compared to possible competitors. And it's not always direct competitors too, we've noticed. So for example, we're a branding agency. If somebody were to go online and type in marketing Connecticut, right, where we're from, we'll come up for sure, but there's a lot of other things that'll come up on that search engine as well. Those are indirect competitors and direct competitors. They may not all be agencies, but they all are possible solutions to those looking for solving a certain problem. right? So being able to position yourself in the market space and know where you are in that market compared to all of those possible competitors that are out there, whether direct or indirect. So brand positioning is incredibly important once we have the basics of your brand discovery figured out.
Yeah, I mean, so once we kind of, position the brand, which is usually like step two, so right after we go through that brand discovery phase, we then go right into brand positioning. And then that really allows us to begin to craft the value proposition of the brand, which, very much leads into brand messaging, which is really the kind of third step in our strategic process. So that's where we really develop like I said, the value proposition. So what is that primary messaging, those primary, unique selling points or, unique attributes that we want to highlight about the brand when your target markets or various audiences think of your brand, what are they thinking? We want to make sure that messaging is not only consistent, but also accurate to how we want to portray that brand and what we really want to be conveying. And then very, tightly tied to that is tone of voice. So how do we want the brand to be speaking to various audiences? It might differ depending on the target markets that you're addressing or the goals that you have and how you want to address them, and what you kind of want that end result to be. So tone of voice and brand messaging are, very much intertwined and a really important step in that process as well. It starts to very much define the brand personality as well. So like I said, how it's being perceived.
Perception is the big thing here, right? So if we go back to that brand discovery component, that's about figuring out the internal perception, who you are to yourself if it's your brand. If you talk about positioning, you're really talking about the perception against the whole market space. Where do you fit in against all of that? And as you start getting into the communication strategies, the messaging, you're talking about the perception of those you're speaking to, whether that's visual, which we'll talk about in a second, or that's written, right, or spoken, et cetera, et cetera. It could be all sorts of things. But this does bring us into the consistent visual identity aspects as well. So I'll start with a mistake that I see that happens a lot when we're dealing with branding with folks, especially when it comes to brand identity aspects. A lot of times they'll come to us and say, I need a brand update, my logo needs a refresh, I want to change my colors, whatever it is. And when we go back to that why, back to the strategy, right, the brand discovery aspect of why do you think you need this? If they're not able to discern maybe a business problem or a target market alignment issue, it usually comes back to a personal preference thing, in which case it's our job to go, hey, your brand isn't for you necessarily, it's for those that you serve, right? And when we're talking about brand strategy, that's all about identifying, again, just reiterating, your why, your core values, your value proposition, your target markets, and how do you communicate that to those target markets, right? So each of those target markets, you need to speak to them in a certain way that they get it. But beyond all of that, or if you zoom out from that, it needs to be consistent. The whole brand concept needs to be consistent, and that's where brand identity comes in. So the brand strategy leads directly into that because you already know the tone of voice, how you want to come off, kind of the essence or the vibe, right? So if you can translate that into a visual aesthetic, kind of a mood board is usually what we'll do first. We call them stylescapes, where we use colors and typography fonts. And certain design aesthetics and choices to really have a brand come across a certain way. It could be fun and colorful, or it might be a little bit more serious and maybe more neutral colors, or somewhere in between, right? A lot of nuanced, intentional aspects are put together in a design way, visually speaking, so that this brand comes off consistently, visually, to all the ideal target markets, and then you can be nuanced within that in different campaigns, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so then, a lot of times clients will come to us and they don't really have a defined visual identity. So what we, like to do with our brand strategy that we craft for them, and then also the visual identity, we like to, build what we call a brand kit. So it will be comprised of, the brand strategy that we had developed. So all things like target markets, core values, tone of voice, brand messaging, your value proposition, things like that. And then in addition to that, we also create a style guide. So, the brand strategy is guidelines in one way, like messaging and kind of how the brand should be communicating and things like that. And then
Perception,
the style guide is more of those guidelines for the visual identity. And so those two things together really allow for consistency and cohesion across all brand touch points, which really is something we reinforce as one of the most important things a brand can do, because that's what builds trust with target markets, increases recognizability, and things like that. So that's definitely something we like to highlight, and things that a brand should, have, those little tools that they should have.
And just to really hammer that point a bit more, the consistency is very, very key. I usually use the metaphor of, if you have a person, a friend that you've known forever, right? But every time you see them, once a year, twice a year, they're kind of a different person. Their whole persona changes. You learn not to really be too close to them. You don't really trust them as much because you almost don't know who they are because they don't know who they are. It's the same thing with a business. If it's really just trying to follow trends that are out there, or if it's just changing who it is and how it speaks or the way it looks or any of that stuff too much, and it's not really taking into consideration the consistency and the trust building of a certain target audiences that it's trying to work with, you're not going to have a brand that's going to be very trustworthy and credible. People are not going to want to come back or even refer you for that matter, right?
Might not know you exist.
Might not know you exist because you've changed so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So consistency, very, very, very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of jump over to the next sort of phase of our strategic process. So marketing is a big buzzword. Basically every client comes to us and they're like, we need to do better marketing, whatever that means. Or they don't know what to do, or they don't know what's right. Same thing with design, same thing with all the, decisions we make. We really use the brand strategy as the foundation for all those decisions, for everything that, we help implement and execute with a brand. So the next sort of thing we will dive into is content marketing strategy. So first we'll, figure out what their goals are. So whether they're trying to educate their audience or drive sales or, inspire, or whatever it might be. We figure out those goals and then, develop a content marketing strategy that aligns with those goals. So we'll define content pillars, the topic areas that the brand should be, speaking about and sharing their insights about. Also communication channels. So what channel should they be utilizing to deliver these messages? So whether that's social media platforms or articles or, advertisements in other publications or their website, whatever channel it might be, we'll define those strategically, because you're not, just like content pillars, you don't want to speak on everything or, talk about everything. You want to define those messaging points. Same thing with communication channels. You don't want to be everywhere. You don't need to be everywhere. If your brand isn't relevant on TikTok or Instagram, then why be there? Right. But, there might be other channels that are more suitable. So we really, the brand strategy very much guides us into, figuring out where to be and what to say, essentially.
Yeah. So different platforms have different reasons you want to be on them, right? So just some examples. So social media is really good for short, pithy, concise content pieces, right? But you might use your own website for long form. You might have long form videos that might live in a post on your website, and you might chop that up into little tiny nuggets that you put out on social platforms, short form video, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to know who your target audiences are from that strategy lets you know where they're at, what's the best way to communicate to them across different platforms. That's really where this content marketing strategy comes together here. So once you have the idea of who you're serving, the value, the entire strategy out of the way, you know how you want to come across, and you know who it's for and how you want to come across to them, you then decide where you're going to target them, and you create a marketing plan from that.
Yeah, for sure. And then, kind of those final steps there are making sure that first your internal team is on the same page as far as, who you are as a brand, what your strategy is, what your marketing plan is, and which is why we provide those things like a brand strategy report and a style guide. That brand kit together really serves as the resource to be able to educate your internal team so that you're putting out, once again, a consistent and cohesive brand at all brand touch points. Starting with that internal team and then rolling it out externally, rolling out this strategy, rolling out this marketing plan, and then from there just evaluating what's working and what's not. And, that's how we kind of learn and adapt and grow.
Yep. Absolutely. So once you have it actually launched, right, then it's a matter of, is this successful? Is this working? Is this not working? Right? So this is going to be defined based on the goals you set in your content marketing strategies, but also in your brand strategies, right? So all those strategies should be based on business objectives. You want to become a subject matter expert in your industry about something, or you want to generate more leads for whatever type of product or service you offer. Those are going to be the goals that are going to be defined in that strategy anyway. So then being able to know that up front allows you to decide how are we going to monitor and track this later on, right? So being able to track certain results about your brand presence and engagement across different audiences is going to let you know how your brand's being received, right? What sort of feedback are you getting? What sort of interactions are happening? Are people referring you now? Can you track that? Why do people refer you? Can you track that? And this allows you to further refine and define your brand strategy from there. So it's an ongoing process.
For sure, and success means different things to different people. So like you said, defining those goals from the start will be important to see, how you're actually performing.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, what advice would you give to a brand who's questioning if they have a brand strategy or they don't really know what their brand strategy is? What would you tell them?
If you're looking for what's the thing I got to do this year for my marketing, you're doing it wrong. Right? That's quick fixes. That's not long-term strategy. I think that's tactical. So what I would say is maybe do more of an internal deep dive, and that might be working with your own team if you have one, or yourself kind of therapizing yourself in a way. Or if you're already in business, the best thing you could do is go talk to your audiences. Literally ask them, why did you work with me in the first place? Why did you come back again for more stuff? Why did you refer me to so-and-so, right? And when someone tells you that, a new client comes to you and they're like, oh, your other client referred me, they said you did a good job, what does that mean to them? Because these are the value perceptions that people have of your brand, and perhaps your marketing isn't portraying that. So if you could discern what the value perception is of your brand as seen by your existing audiences, you have a huge jumpstart on your brand strategy of how you can start communicating the value you offer. So I would say maybe start there.
Yeah.
And
that's who your brand is for, by the way, is for your audiences.
Yeah.
Sometimes that one's forgotten a little bit.
Yeah, it's fair. So hopefully this video has helped you think about some insights for your brand and how it is and how it can be. If you want some more helpful information, we have a ton of it on our website that we put together related to brand strategy, digital marketing, etc., etc. So make sure you check that out. And
if you want to talk more about your brand, go to our website, schedule a free consultation, and we'll get even further into brand strategy and what it means for your brand.